What is your, how shall I?
I'm Louis. Louis Alvarez.
I'll refer you Louis.
Yeah, you can call me Louis.
Shouldn't be different since we're from Louisiana, huh?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, you've been in politics in Louisiana a long time. What do you think is the first rule of politics to be a successful politician in Louisiana? What do you have to do?
Well, to be a successful politician in Louisiana, well, perhaps there are two different ways. First of all, if you get enough organizational support behind you, like all the newspapers, for example, that gives you a tremendous start. On the other hand, on the other way, is to come up from the masses. That's where the Longs came from the masses. If you go back and check the history of this state, most of the time, the masses candidate wins. We're not a conservative state in the true sense of the word. And foreign policy, we are conservative. But generally speaking, we're a populist state. And the elections and the people who have been elected in this state demonstrate that that's true. Every few years, every 4 to 8 years, you will get a true conservative, so-called good government candidate in there. But as a general rule, at least I think 2 to 1, you'll find a populist man is elected in our state. Well, because we're poor people down here. We're 27.5% black. Weren't years ago, but we are now. I mean, voting population. Perhaps first, second, or third in the nation. And secondly, we're poor white. And with that, those of us who are poor white feel like perhaps that we want someone there who represents us. And generally speaking, this is a populist state. I came from the populist side of it. The Longs did. Edmund Edwards did, etc. Bob Kennan did not. Sam Jones did not. David Treen did not. But most of the time, we have a populist governor in this state.
Did that start with Huey Long, or was there a tradition?
It was here, but Huey made the major breakthrough. As I read the history, of course, Huey Long's time was really before my time. I was in high school when he was killed. But he made the breakthrough. See, up until Huey Long's time, you had to pay a tax to be able to vote in this state. No blacks at all, even a white person. If he were real poor, unless someone paid his poll tax for him, couldn't vote here either. And Huey Long made the breakthrough here in this state.
When you were coming up as a politician, did you try to learn from Huey Long? Did he influence you in any way?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. A lot of things that the Longs did and stood for I didn't approve of. But I like the idea of a man being elected from the masses, from one who had no claim to material wealth or aristocratic name, etc. I liked that because I was out there, kind of the unclean, the unwashed. And I liked a man to hold office who was like I was. And that's really what the Longs represented, and that's what they had going for them. And when they got in there, of course, they not only made the promises, they delivered on them to a great extent.
What about Jimmy Davis? Was he in that tradition?
I don't think so. Jimmy Davis was not elected by that faction of our state. He was really elected by the good government people, the more conservative people, but his background was populist. You follow me? His demeanor, his background, his life was populist. But I don't think that Jimmy was just a take it easy sort of fella, let's live and let live, etc. As he said, while you're singing, you can't be fussing. And that was what he had going for him. But he was backed by these so-called conservative elements of the state, although that was not his background. But he appealed, his background, his demeanor, country singing, western singing, appealed to the masses. But that I'm not sure that Jimmy had any strong beliefs about government. Decent and good man. He's a good friend of mine, but he wasn't a true populist governor.
And to you,
He was elected and supported by all the daily newspapers and the very conservative, the corporate people of the state.
so when you ran, your populist philosophy was very important to you.
Well, it's important to get me elected, and I'd been in the legislature for a term. I'd been on the Public Service Commission for 10 years, and I had some record to run on.
Do you think the populist spirit is still alive?
I certainly do. I certainly do. And we're right approaching a new election, and except for Edmund Edwards' demeanor, his conduct, the record, at least allegations of unethical and improper conduct is what's thrown him. Not the fact that he's representing the masses. I think if it were not for that, I think he'd be easily reelected.
What is it about his demeanor that seems to?
I'd rather not pass judgment on that. The record's out there. The people of this state know as well as I do. I don't approve very, very much of the way Governor Edwards conducts himself, the way he's conducted state government myself. Do not approve of it at all. At all. Very strongly disapproved.
Do you think he makes a distinction between his behavior as governor and his behavior as just a private person? When he goes to Las Vegas, do you think he's thinking, I'm the governor of a state going, as opposed to I'm just?
I don't know what he's thinking of. I don't approve of the Las Vegas escapades. I don't believe it's an example that the governor should set for the people of the state.
But the people of the state have reelected him. Do you think people win?
Yes, but not on the record he's made this time. Not on the record he's made this time. And it's yet to be seen whether he's going to be reelected on the record he's made this time.
So what was it that reelected him the first couple of times?
Well, the economy had a lot to do with it. When oil went from $3 to $33, he had money to do things in the state that really no other governor had. While I was governor, we finally reached $1 billion budget. Shortly after I left, we were $5 billion and had the money to do it. Without, as a matter of fact, not only do it, they didn't have to raise taxes to do it. They could reduce taxes and did it. If you will recall, reduce the sales tax on food and drug, very worthy thing if it could be done. Income taxes, reduce them, and paying on oil and gas when it went from $3 to $33. That was the main thing, in my opinion, he had going for him. This time, he had the reverse. And then additionally, his record in his personal life has hurt him terribly in this second term, no question about that.
It's been said that there are two Louisianas. There's North Louisiana and South Louisiana. And that they behave differently, and a politician has to appeal to both.
Perhaps so, but it's getting less and less so, I think, every year. People do things now. A divorced man used to be, that was it, he'd been divorced. That isn't true now. Reagan, the Kennedy's various escapades look like it hadn't hurt him, it's helped them. We've got two candidates in the race for governor now who are divorced men. It looked like it's never even been suggested it might hurt them at all. And people's morals, their feeling about life, the conduct has changed a great deal. Previously, say 50 years ago, up say even maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the Catholic, as are the Methodists on the Protestant side of it, are more tolerant. As I understand the Catholic faith, close Catholic friends, and talking to various priests, and the Methodist Church too, believe in tolerance. Don't be excessive in things. You like drinking, it's not a sin. The Baptist, it's a sin. Catholic, even Methodist, it's not a sin. That was back there a long time ago. And then the fear of the Protestant people about what the Catholic would do and the Pope from Rome, etc., 50 years ago. That's gone now. And I think perhaps my election had a great deal to do with that, because for the first time, except when Huey and Earl were running. But without the organized support, I went into South Louisiana and Acadiana and carried those parishes down there. I beat a very worthy man, for example, in Vermilion Parish. And I had a lot to do, I think, with breaking up that feeling, a division between North and South. And I went out of my way to prove while I was in North Louisiana that it didn't make any difference to me. And I think I conclusively proved that. It made no difference to me. And Edward's done a lot since he's from South Louisiana, North Louisiana, et cetera. And I think those old boundary lines and ties, et cetera, I think they're gone now, to a large extent. Any person who runs from a certain area where if he's worth anything, is going to run better where he lives in that area than he will in other areas of the state.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said that in the Acadiana parishes, they're just much more forgiving of personal weakness, let's say, in a candidate.
Perhaps so, but I find the opposition to some of the conduct of the incumbent governor just as strong in South Louisiana as I do in North Louisiana. I really do.
How do you think the enfranchisement, you've got all these new black voters in the last 15 years.
And it's changed the way of doing politics. You've got 27.5% of black population, and it changed the way of doing things. It's going to be bordering on the impossible for a person to be elected governor without some black support.
Do you think that the black politicians are moving into the mainstream of Louisiana politics, that they're basically behaving like white politicians always have? For example, in New Orleans?
I think it's a new thing for them, and in recent weeks, recent months, even weeks, we've seen some black officialdom be charged with having violated the law. It's a new thing to them, being in positions of power and prestige. And I must say, when they see someone much higher than them doing it, they've got some right to assume that's the way the things are done. That's the way to do it. I really believe that. And I think that's led some of them into getting into trouble who would not have gotten into trouble. I think there's some really bright, young black political people in this state who are going to assume a really decisive leadership role in Louisiana. I think particularly and specifically of Senator Bill Jefferson from Orleans Parish. I think he has a bright future in this state. I'm not saying that the people are about ready to, we're going to elect a black governor soon, but I'd be surprised if he doesn't hold some high elected position, statewide position. In the not too distant future, I give that an example because he's a very intelligent, articulate man, and I think he's going to do well in the future. And that's changed dramatically because when I was governor, there had not been, for example, a black judge in Louisiana for 100 years. I appointed 2. Mayor Morial was one of them. And they're coming on. But I say in fairness to them, those who've gotten in trouble, and there have been some, gosh, what can you expect of him? He's doing it up there. I guess that must be the way it's done.
Starts at the top, then, huh?
You said it. I think that the higher you on the executive ladder, the better example you must set. And if it's done there, and they know it's done there, well, they say, well, that's the way. That's the way.
One of the candidates for governor says that he loves Louisiana, he hates Louisiana politics, and that the general impression around the state is that the governorship is for sale, and politics are basically.
I think I don't adhere to that. I was elected governor, and I was the poorest finance person in the race. All the power was against me. Everything was against me when I was everything. Newspapers, corporations, organized labor, blacks, and all. Senator Russell Long, the great power man in the state 20 years ago, bitterly opposed me. I don't think that's true. It's not for sale. I had no money at all. But it turned out I had the people. I disagree with that theory. It's not for sale. Nothing can be bought. If it gets out on you that you're spending a lot of money and you're raising money where you shouldn't be raising, it will hurt you. I disagree with him completely on that.
There is a lot more money that floats around during these elections, though, in terms of buying television time and that sort of thing. That would then in another state, for example, Connecticut or Iowa. Do you think that's true? There's just a lot more money spent on races.
Perhaps so. We have pretty strict laws here now. And you know where it's coming from, you know where it's being spent. I don't think we'll ever have expensive elections as we had 4 years ago, for example. I think, and we're not this year. I think you can overdo it.
So do you think that if we get a governor who lives an exemplary life and sets a good example,
That will help tremendously.
you think it'll help all the lower levels?
Without question. Without question. Without question.
Do you think there's been a certain tradition in Louisiana of the shells in your driveway kind of
Do what?
Police juror, call up your local police juror, get some shells in your driveway. That's sort of I'll scratch your
Well, that makes good propaganda, but there's very little of that. That's isolated. I've lived in a rural area all of my life. Truth is, it's a known fact that when I left Baton Rouge after being governor 8 years, I left a poorer man than when I came here. I cashed in my life insurance and lived off of it till I decided what I was going to do. And that makes good propaganda and good talk, because one person will violate the law, they all do it. That isn't true. There's a lot of decent and good people here who've held high office. And as I did, made actually literally some financial sacrifice. Directly, of course, indirectly, if you're in office and conduct yourself right, and you're a professional man such as I am, an attorney, indirectly it will help you. People say, I want to go and hire this man because he conducts himself right, and I know he'll tend to my business right. You get a lot of indirect benefits, but directly. I went home a poor man. It wasn't an accident. I went deliberately. I wanted to. I had another opportunity to make a lot of money legitimately. Had no connection with state government at all. People I want to be in business with the government. I didn't want to. I said, I don't want to make any money while I'm governor, no matter how ethical and proper it is. I don't want to. I don't want to say that he enriched himself while he was governor, and I did not. When I came down here to Baton Rouge, and before I was on the Louisiana Public Service Commission, I owned Hogan Plantation, and I'd made it practicing law. These pictures you see on the wall of the oil and gas company, I formed that company 3 years after I left the governor's office.
So you kept everything very separate.
You're darn right, and I'm proud of it.
Let me change the subject here. Who do you think was the most skillful Louisiana politician you ever came across?
Mr. Earl was when he was sane.
That's who now?
Earl Long, Mr. Governor Long, when he was sane. The last 4 years of his life, he was mentally ill. And those of us who knew him knew he was mentally ill. But when he was at himself and really at it, he was a great one. He's the best man in adversity I've ever seen. Mr. Earl could not stand success. It would drive him insane. And in '56, when he won the first primary, he never came back down to earth. Never came back down to earth. But he was an extremely skillful politician.
Can you tell us how did he work?
He went out with the masses and convinced them he was the man to go. He had name recognition, long, as my son has and is helping him now. Whether it'll get him in enough doors and he convince enough people to vote for him, it's got to be up to him. But he was a very skillful politician. Very skillful politician. He would never look at a poll. Never appear on television. He didn't do well on television, so he wouldn't get on there. He was that smart. And he'd say the poll, I agree with him about the poll. He said, look, if you're going to run, what good's a poll going to do you? He said, if it says you can't win, he said, and you already determined to run, you've got to stay in there. And if it says you can win, it'll make you lazy and you'll quit working. That's his theory. And that's pretty well the way I made my big successful campaign against the power structures of this state. Labor and industry were opposed to me. I presume you know that. Organized labor took a 2/3 vote to endorse, and they lacked 9 votes out of about 1,000 votes cast of endorsing my opponent. If I hadn't come there and spoken to them, they would endorse my opponent. Every paper in the state was against, all the corporations were against me. I used to say that briefly, I don't belong to the country club. I've never been inside of a fraternity house in my life. All the corporations are against me. All the papers against me. All the politicians are against me. And it turned out the have-nots outvoted the haves. And that's this state. I think it's a populist state. You get a situation like you've got now where a populist incumbent conducts himself in such a manner that people are just determined to turn him out. He's going out. But then if they have the other side for one term, wait, I'm just counting up my son's votes now. Have y'all met Fox?
No,
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 never had.
You haven't met him?
Among family, as it were.
Yeah.
How
What was you want to say?
Okay. All right, we were talking about, you remember what you were saying? We were talking
I
about.
said that a governor who, a man who's a populist will generally win here. But if a populist governor conducts himself in such a manner, that just gets too rough for even the masses of the populist segment of this state to stand it, then they're going to turn him out. They're going to turn him out. And that occurs every few terms. And then he goes in one term, and as a premise and as historically, he doesn't become a very popular governor.
This is the
He cleans it up. That's just the tradition of this state. Sam Jones is a classic example. He beat the long machine. But gosh, he was an unpopular governor before he got out of there. And then he ran 4 years later against Mr. Earl. Mr. Earl beat him nearly to death. If you got a populist governor who's clean and clear and good, who basically wants to do right and doesn't want to enrich himself or his friends, run against a man who's a conservative with the same background and record and desires, the populists will beat him well without him. In my opinion.
Is there something, do the populist governors, and I think you'd be an exception because you were followed by another populist governor, but some of the earlier ones like the Longs.
That's the only ones I knew of. Of course, I came along, I voted in the first governor's election in 1940. You had Earl Long, who represented at that time the old Long machine, running against Sam Jones, a good government man, the conservative man. I consider myself a populist, but I voted for Sam Jones. I just couldn't stand what the other side had done and stood for. But I really would rather been on the other side. And when I got a chance to vote again, I couldn't wait to get back on the populist side. You follow me? But I thought the state needed cleansing and needed new leadership and new faces. And so I voted in 1940 for Sam Houston Jones. Very conservative.
And he lasted one term.
Yes, sir.
And
Couldn't succeed yourself then. Couldn't succeed yourself then.
but there's never been.
But he was very unpopular by the time he got it. They very shrewdly got a hold of Jimmy Davis, who with a populist background, the conservative good government people, and ran Jimmy Davis. You follow me on just personal popularity? Jimmy was extremely personally popular, but he really didn't represent the group who really supported him, the newspapers, etc., and ran him.
He wasn't a true populist, but he looked like one.
That's right. He was reared like one and sang like one. But the people who ran him and supported him and put up the money and endorsed him were the more conservative people.
Let's see what else we got here. Why did you get into politics? What was it about it?
Well, it was just a natural thing for me. I came back from World War II. I had 4 years of it. Had finished law school, went in the Army immediately, and I came back a little rural, poverty-stricken area of the state where I lived. It was just a natural thing. I was an attorney and practicing law, in particular in the rural area, and running for office works awfully good together. You get free publicity as an attorney without advertising for business. Get to meet people. And then I liked it. And as I said, I first came into the legislature.
Do you think Louisiana politics is different from the rest of the country?
Well, we're a unique state in that we have our French background for much of our state. French, Catholic, as I say, the religion thing is really not an issue anymore. But people of French descent, perhaps they feel it. Like all of us, whatever ethnic background we are, we feel it. We have something in common with others of the same ethnic descent and background. And then the city of New Orleans comes in there, which is really a world of its own. And now you've got this tremendous black voter registration, which comes into play too, and it makes it extremely difficult. It's very difficult to be elected to statewide office, and you can't give up the city because in that metropolitan area you got a third of the votes. And you can't overlook 27.5%, which are black now. And it's a unique state. You go in New Orleans now, there are brogues in there that you think you're in Brooklyn, New York. You go down there, you think you're in Brooklyn. You've got the Irish Channel crowd, where it's pure Irish, and it sounds like Irish. Italian, tremendous Italian population in New Orleans, as you know. Funny thing, here I was a kind of a minority man myself, a Louisiana redneck, and the Italian people and I just looked like just hit it off well. I guess we all felt like maybe we hadn't quite arrived yet. Are you with me?
Sure.
And I picked up people like that, and I know I won't be offending them when I say that. They said, well, maybe I haven't quite arrived. I'm Italian and I'm a Louisiana redneck. I haven't quite got in. They haven't asked me to come join the club. You follow me? And to get into fraternities, because I haven't got anything to offer them. The Lebanese, and I had something in common for the same reasons. And to some extent, the poor rural Cajun and I had a lot in common, because we had not quite arrived. And when I got that group realizing, when I ran for governor, that we were all together, all of us were perhaps a minority. I was part of a minority, I thought. As my speech was, I'd said, look, I'm just John McKeithen, I'm a citizen of Louisiana. I don't belong to the country club. I've never been inside of a fraternity house in my life. I wasn't born to material wealth. I have no claim to an aristocratic name. Well, when you get through with that, you've caught in a lot of segment of this population. You hear me? And I got through, and I made this speech in the Italian Hall the night before the election. The old Italian Hall had been torn down in New Orleans now, and God, it was filled to the rafters. And I said, you think I might beat this man? I didn't think I was going to win. And I said, if I can be elected governor of this state, I said, that child you holding in your arms can aspire to be governor of this great state. And with that, I said, if you will help me, I can win it. And will you help me? And with that, I thought you were going to throw that baby up to the rafters. And really, I was speaking from the heart. It wasn't any flim-flam stuff, because that's what I was. And I was able to establish myself as a person who felt like maybe I haven't been treated quite right in this state. If you get, and well, I want to stand up for that fella. I see someone on television now, and I feel like maybe it's kind of a poor fella, wasn't born to any social position, etc. And my heart goes out to him immediately. I got a candidate for running for mayor right after I was elected governor, and he was on television here, and he put on most pitiful tale about this, that, and the other. I don't mind telling you, it was Woody Dumas. I just been elected governor, and my wife looked at him, and she got her hank, she's going to cry, and she said, I don't know this man, but said if I could vote in Baton Rouge, I sure would vote for him. You know Woody? That I sure would vote. He said others wasn't Woody would, and she said I sure would vote for Woody. She knew who Woody was from anything in the world. But perhaps that's true in all politics. I don't think, as I say, except for the city of New Orleans, French descent, North Louisiana is not like Mississippi and Alabama, Georgia.
As a populous governor, is part of your, you know, the things, your mandate for you to deliver a lot of services to those people, to the poor people of the state? Because that's something Huey Long is famous for: paved roads and school books.
Well, I took a little different kick. I remember I used to speak around with Senator Russell along some. We were trying to get industry in the state, and we were very successful, perhaps, as you know. This whole chemical industry from here in New Orleans, nearly all of it I brought in here, and I say I brought, our industrial inducement program brought it, that we initiated. I used to speak with Russell, and I said, if Huey Long was still here, Senator Long's father, I said, he still wouldn't be seeing share our wealth. It's already been shared. Social Security, high income taxes, high end heritage taxes, we don't need them. What we need now is get some jobs for people. And it's a little different approach, but I took the approach that let's try to provide jobs for us here. I think the two-term thing was a mistake. And I would like to see, for the good of our state, to see it be done away with.
Back to one term.
That's correct. I really didn't initiate the two-term thing, but when it was brought up in the legislature, my opposition, whatever I had, opposed it, and it was kind of a challenge. I had to go on with it, but I had some reservations about it, I must say, even then. But I think it's a mistake, and I think it should go back to one term. An incumbent governor, he's going to be a lame duck sooner or later anyway. And he shouldn't be worrying about what can I do to get myself reelected. If he just said, I can't serve but one term no matter what I do. Do you follow me? As I look back now, I think I feel a little freer and a little more courageous in doing things that need to be done. If I wouldn't have the fear I'd get so unpopular I'd get kicked out of office. And if you just got one term, so no matter what I do, I can't be governor again, not for 4 years, let me go on and do it. I really believe that's best for our state, one single term, and I'd like to see it changed. If we ever get in a position of power, we are, we're going to change it. Or we can, or recommend the people that change. I don't think it's good for Louisiana.
Do you know any, can you tell us about how, I heard Earl Long was real good on the stump when he was campaigning.
Yes, he was. He was an excellent stump speaker. The best I ever heard. I never heard Mr. Huey Long, Senator Long, Huey Long make but one speech in my life. But Mr. Earl was great. He knew what the rural population wanted to hear, and he had an unbelievable sense of humor. It just tickled you, particularly if you were rural, it would just tickle you to death. And he was an excellent stump speaker, the best I ever heard.
Can you give us some examples of his humor?
Well, there was a governor, and I won't call his name here because we are very friendly and I won't do anything to embarrass him at all, who had rather large ears. And Mr. Earl was insisting that this particular candidate was taking campaign money and putting it away for future endeavors. Do you follow me? For bad times. I don't think it was true because he was a good man and a decent man. I don't think it was true, but at least it was funny. And we were in Ville Platte one night speaking. And he asked the crowd, there must have been 1,000 people there, if they'd ever noticed this particular individual's ears. And he said that, this is country humor that's funny to me. He said he's got ears, he told them, like blinders on a mule. I don't know whether you've ever seen those blinders on a mule where you can't look to the side. And then he screamed out and said, they serve him well, too. We were in Ville Platte. You know how far it is from Ville Platte to Opelousas? About 15 miles, I believe. He said he can hear a dollar bill drop from Ville Platte to Opelousas. Well, I could see a dollar bill just floating down to the ground. Well, to me, that was hilariously funny, and everyone there was funny. But he wasn't as good a joke teller as Cousin Dudley J. LeBlanc. Senator LeBlanc was a great one, too. I had the pleasure of knowing Senator LeBlanc extremely well, and Mr. Earl, too, and I liked them both. But last 4 years of Mr. Earl's life, he was a mentally ill man, and it didn't fair to judge him, and I hate to see him, pictures of him where he was obviously mentally deranged, and it was such a desecration, I think, of, in many ways, I knew to be a decent man.
Well, How was he?
Mr. Earl was very scrupulous, when he was sane, very scrupulously guarded the state's money, very scrupulously. And while I was his leader there in actually 4 years he was there, leader in the House of Representatives, if he ever did anything wrong in trying to enrich himself, I must say I was never aware of it the least bit, and he condemned anyone who did. And I can't believe that he did. I think I would have known about it. But he very scrupulously guarded the state's money.
How was
And he held anyone in absolute contempt who tried to make money out of politics when he was sane.
How could he run a state if he was not in possession of his full faculties?
Well, he didn't the last 4 years. While he was governor, the 4 years was just horrible. And he got worse and worse and worse. But from the time he was elected in '56 until he died, he was mentally deranged. Like his wife, of course, everyone. He had, and the sad part about it was he had the problems that those who were closest to him he'd turn on and accuse them of everything in the world, denounce them and humiliate them. And I was very close to him, and when I observed that he was not right, I got away from him. I talked to him one time while in that 4-year period. He called me on the phone when he was running for Congress and was elected, and asked me if I would allow him to put me on his sample ballot. And I told him yes. I said, your opponent's for me too, but it's all right, Mr. Earl, if that's what you want to do. And he said, I'd made you governor if you hadn't quit me. I said, Mr. Earl, I didn't quit you. I said, you ran me off. and he was dead just a few days later. But he wasn't almost not. And I see these pictures of him taking it. It's really tragic. He had been humiliated when he was sane, and he'd been humiliated. It'd been horrible for him. And it really is tragic. The last 4 years of his life. Well, his own family, Russell and Miss Blanche and everyone else close to him, tried to get him incarcerated for treatment. And it was a sad, tragic thing. I see movies of him now, maybe some on your stuff. I just make me sick to see it.
Well, it's interesting because even while he was sick, he was fighting for civil rights and fighting against some of the real.
I think that's one of the things it caused him to have a breakdown because he couldn't handle the black thing. They were trying to press him into positions where he couldn't take, and then the 2/3 vote to raise revenue had something to do with it too. If we get a different governor, which the polls indicate we may very well do, he's going to find it extremely difficult to accomplish a lot of the things that he says he's going to do. Because I went along with it while I was governor of taking away powers and prestige and prerogatives of the governor. And then the 2/3 vote about raising revenues, I think, is a horrible thing on this state. It's virtually impossible. And if you do, you have to promise things and do things that are not good government. And occasionally you're going to have to raise some more revenue or change the way you raise revenue. But you've got to have a 2/3 vote, I can tell you, which is virtually impossible. And you have some unscrupulous people in that legislature who know they got you over a barrel when you need 3 or 4 votes. And you're sitting, well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to give up and say I'm not going to try? Or I'm going to promise them things, not necessarily a violation of the law, but are not in the interest of good government to get the additional revenue for the school teachers, for example. I went through that. And Mr. Earl went through with it. And I finally raised taxes. And like I got myself in trouble, to some extent got myself raising taxes, not for myself, but raising taxes, promising legislators things to get the money to pay the school teachers and the LSU and for the hospitals. But I wasn't asking for much. I wasn't asking but for $100 million. Of course, here they raised $1 billion this last session. I didn't give them $100 million, and I might add just in passing and gave the teachers and the state employees and the higher education people most money they ever got in their history with just $100 million. But when I got out of there, oil went from $3 to $33, and well, gracious, everyone was just on cloud 9 till it went back down to about half of what it had been, and then it wasn't such good government.
So, what is a constitutional amendment to change that? You think?
The 2/3
Yeah.
vote. I dare say it would never be approved.
But I mean, that's what it would take.
What are you going to do? It sounds good. Now, where are the results? And that's what's happened to most of the good government candidates who've been down here.
That's where they get unpopular.
That's what's happened to most of them. The quips, the talk about the waste and the deadheads, some of it, of course. But widespread, I don't think so. I'm talking about millions of dollars. Somebody shake down somebody here, or you'll have an extra employee here. So we have civil service. Hell, you can't find anybody with civil service. We got that too. You can't find anybody. You follow me? When they start talking about cutting these payrolls, they better go check that civil service law. Are you with me? And it's not going. It's a lot easier said than done. In fairness to Governor Edwards, that part, a lot of the things he says and most of the things he's done, I've disagreed with as strongly in one state. But what he's saying about the difficulty of putting into effect some of the things that the reform, the various, I think practically all of his points saying now, they're going to prove are going to be extremely, extremely difficult to do. What about aid to the private schools, for example? Well, that's a good one.
Takes a lot of money.
Did y'all see the last one? Hello, Wayne. I'm here talking to Lieutenant Service